This is dangerous. A mirror matchup? Look, these are absolute fan favorites. They're in the same team going up against each other. What I've got for you today is a Zerg versus Zerg where we're starting off on Neon Violet Square, spawning right here. In the top left-hand corner, we have the GOAT, and he goes by the name of Serral. His opponent, one of Europe's finest. Playing right here with the blue Zerg drones, we're looking at Reynor's main base. And even though these days, Serral's main nemesis when it comes to European tournaments seems to be Clem, historically, Reynor has given him so much trouble. Reynor Zerg for the Zerg, it was one of the very few matchups where Serral would actually consistently lose. Now these days, his ZVZ, I would say it's quite a bit better than it used to be back then, even though it wasn't bad back in the day either. It is very clear that Serral has worked on it, because it's one of those situations where, well, if you want to win tournaments, you can't just be beating Terrans and Protoss, you also have to be consistently winning against Zerg. Now, obviously, the mirror matchups in StarCraft 2, they are quite a bit more volatile. Especially, really? We're going triple hatch before pool, Serral? Alright. Yeah, they're very volatile and generally a bit unpredictable. So Serral decides to mix it up. He is going triple hatch before making a spawning pool. Are we going to add a gas geyser too? I think so. This is going to be a super late pool. Okay, no, he is going to go for a spawning pool before gas. But only maybe a second or so of difference here. In the meantime, Reynor opening up a little bit more conventionally, but I think this is already fine here for Serral. Not really a whole lot Reynor can do about it. He will obviously be leading as far as link speed goes, but really only by maybe like 10 seconds. He will be able to make slow Zerglings a bit sooner, but you're not going to be able to do much on a map as big as Neon Violet Square. So right from the get-go, the tone has been set. And one more thing, this makes it actually quite difficult for Reynor too. How in the world do you scout this? Because Reynor is going to fly in an Overlord. He will see that this is a hatchery first, but the other hatchery is all the way over there in the corner. And I can imagine that this Overlord is likely going to back up. Yeah. It is going to scout for a potential third base that has already been planted down. Overlord positioning in this matchup is usually a bit different than it is against Terran and against Protoss. You usually want to be positioning your Overlords in the early game at the very least on the attack path. So Reynor is going to be having one Overlord scouting this exit over here for Serral and then one over here too. And that way he should always be spotting any of the units that go across the map early. If you were to scout the back, sure, you would be able to see that there's another base there. You would probably lose it to a queen that would pop, and then, well, you would never be able to see incoming Ling rushes very well. So, Reynor's not going to be able to figure this out. I'm already liking this position quite a bit for Serral, but in the meantime, Reynor is also playing something that is out of the ordinary. Rather than mining 100 gas and going straight for Ling speed, we are still mining gas. He started up a lair, skipped the metabolic boost, and started up a second extractor. This looks to me like Reynor is doing a Mutalisk rush. Or at least some sort of lair rush, but most of the time it's Mutas. He's now also gone for that pocket base in the bottom corner. Serral has this pocket base too. This also screams Mutas to me, because you only have 4 mineral fields, but you do have 2 fully functioning gas geysers. Serral did go link speed, he did go lair quickly on the back of it, left the drones in gas, going second extractor. This could, there it is, Spire, this could very well be Muta versus Muta, which gets really weird. It could be a night display too, but Serral would have to go for a Roach Warren right about right now. I don't think he will. Yeah, so Reynor is certainly going to have the upper hand. He will have more tech sooner, but Serral's economy should be slightly bigger. So assuming they're both going Mutas, it will be a little bit better for Serral, but honestly both of them are being exceptionally greedy right now. We have no Roach Warrens, no Baneling Nests, no Zerglings. There it is. Both of them believe themselves so clever as they're rushing out the greediest builds that you can ever go for. This is a terrible strategy on the ladder. I don't recommend it at all, but in tournaments, this is one of those strategies that may just make sense. So we're gonna get Muta versus Muta wars. It'll very much so come down to 2 things. First off, the very first time that Mutas spawn, Reynor might just be able to obtain the victory right then and there, because he's gonna have like a full minute or so where his Mutas will be out and Serral's will not. But afterwards, Serral's gonna scout it. I think he saw. Yeah. He saw that spire inside of his opponent's base, so I think he's gonna be okay, and he will be able to prepare. The second skill check will be whoever gets more Mutalisks. If it's like 30 Mutas versus 25, right? Say one player has 30 Mutas, the other one has 25, and they fight. The player with 5 more Mutalisks will not win with 5 Mutas staying alive. They will win with like 20 Mutas staying alive. In Muta Wars, it is all about who has the more, or like the bigger number. Bigger is better, at least when it comes to Mutalisk Wars. We do have the +1 coming up for the melee units, +1 Flutter Flyers, and then eventually also Metabolic Boost. Serral did already finish Link Speed, so he's going to be running it across. Reynor trying to take a sneaky gold base. That's not going to happen. Serral will be able to shut that down for good. And the Mutas have to retreat back home. Lovely counterattack right there by Serral. Perfect scout with the Overseer. Not only has he delayed his opponent's 4th base, he's also made it so much easier for himself now. Gets a couple drones here. Got to get his own Mutalisk going. He scouts the pocket expansion now too. A lot of mind games. So the thing about Reynor and Serral is that they are on the same team and they have been competing at a high level for years and years and years. So they will be talking strategy all the time. And the problem is when you talk strategy all the time, yeah. When you play against one another, suddenly the game becomes very tricky. So the Mutalisk is 100 minerals, 100 gas each. Very, very gas heavy. So whoever gets more Mutas, I mean, is gonna likely be the victor. So Serral having a 4th base up and running right now, Reynor losing his. It means that this is all looking very, very good for the finisher once again. You should be able to start out-controlling it. So the way Mutas actually attack, they have like their main attack and then it bounces twice. And you cannot control where that attack bounces to. So sometimes when it's even numbers of Mutas, if you have like, I don't know, a structure underneath or for example, some Zerglings underneath, the bounces can go to those structures or to the Zerglings or whatever is underneath. So ground units can soak up the bounces even if you're target firing down the attacking unit. So there are still some micro tricks here. And obviously if Reynor techs up, maybe he can get a Viper out. Vipers have a spell called Parasitic Bomb. It deals 120 damage to area of effect. Mutas have 120 life. There are still opportunities here for Reynor, but all of it is a little bit finicky. Reynor did have faster upgrades. Generally speaking though, armor upgrades are more important in Muta Wars. Reynor went for the +1 flyer attacks first. Serral's going straight into the +2 armor. So that is certainly better here for Serral, but yeah, everything is going well, but it's still a mirror matchup. It's still Zerg versus Zerg. This is all extremely finicky. It's still very easy to throw an advantage, even when it's a significant one. Okay. Will Reynor make the transition towards the Infestation Pit, though? No, he's gonna go into the Baneling Nest instead. Serral should just be able to produce way more Mutas. He doesn't really have a reason to be too aggressive, although he does need to address that gold base. That gold base really needs to be done. Reynor actually forgetting one of the gases on that newly acquired base. There are some Zerglings out. Obviously, the defender's advantage is big. I love this Zergling run by here. Serral trying to see if he can take a fight over at that gold. Okay. Mutas trying to see if they can get a proper engagement. Serral trying to bait it away. Gets a good round of drones. 5 drones in like half a second. There is a group of Lynx now waiting in the top right-hand corner too. Maybe though they are better at use at home because Lynx are running in again. Yeah, Serral looking very dominant here. It's not like this game has been an easy one, but it does seem like he is leading in basically every aspect. He's now found an opportunity. Mutas are so quick that it's pretty much impossible for Reynor to disengage, and I think this is the best fight he's ever going to get. It's very chaotic, but the worker numbers, or the Muta numbers rather, are dropping very fast. Pretty much a flawless game for the finisher. Alrighty. Next up, we find ourselves on Abyssal Reef. No race switching. This particular tournament match was recently played. It is from the Lulu Cup, so I don't know if you can switch race. I'm not exactly sure if you're allowed to switch, for example, to Protoss in between. But then again, if you are in Reynor's shoes right now, yeah, Reynor has been playing a lot of Protoss versus Zerg, and he's been reasonably successful. The thing is, do you really want to play against Serral Zerg as Protoss if you are Reynor? Probably not. It'd be fun for the fans, but I think if you want to win a series, especially looking at their historic results, these two are basically... maybe it's like a 60-40 advantage for Serral, but in my mind, it's about a 50-50 for the both of them. I think Serral actually has been a bit more successful over the years lately, but Reynor certainly has taken some very important wins over Serral historically in this particular matchup, and I really don't believe anybody's confident going up against Serral Zerg with Protoss, so maybe max specs. But who knows? For now, everything here is very normal. It's going to be a hedge gas pool. Abyssal Reef, obviously a very large map. So far, neither of them really doing any tricks. No shenanigans. Okay. So the norm in this matchup is to start off with Zerglings, then transition into Banelings, and then generally go into Roaches. We didn't see any of that in the previous game. Both of them playing so greedy, and then ultimately one player turned out to be a little bit greedier than the other. Probably good planning there and nice predicting by Serral, but it's not how the general Zerg versus Zerg will look like on the ladder. As a matter of fact, if you are a ladder hero, the vast majority of your Zerg versus Zergs will be over by about minute 4. That is not me exaggerating. The amount of aggression and the amount of cheese in ZVZ is insane. At this level, the pro gamers will be able to hold early game rushes with relative ease, especially on a map as big as Abyssal Reef. It's gonna be unlikely that we will see a 13-12, like a very quick Zergling speed rush, or some sort of Ling Bane bust. But it still happens every once in a while, and it is still something that can win you games. The problem is, being the defender in these situations is extremely hard. So, commonly, say you're a Diamond League Zerg player, a lot of games will just be two guys rushing Zerglings and Banelings at one another. And then every once in a while you get a transition towards Roaches, but that's about it. Sometimes you will play the macro game, but it's a very uncommon scenario. So, ZVZ at the pro level tends to look very different than Zerg versus Zerg at the ladder level. Oh, both of them dancing with the links. I think Reynor wins this ever so slightly. Serral going around. Keep in mind that the links will regen HP as well. Yeah, even when you survive the Ling Bane phase, there's still like the Roach Ravager phase, and then obviously you get Tunneling Claws, you can go Roach Drops, you can very easily go Nidus Worm as well. So, technically there is a late game. Usually the late game in this matchup is Hydra Lurker Viper. That is the all best unit composition in ZVZ. It's just very difficult to get to, because there's like 17 layers of aggression that you have to deal with before you ever get to that point. I would like to see it, though. We don't get a ton of ZVZ in tournaments these days. I guess if we are ever gonna see it, it would be on a map like this, between players of this caliber. Defensive Baneling here for Serral. Don't want to be trading that against a Ling. Generally, you need at least like 3 to 4 Lings for that to be reasonably useful. Couple Lings coming around the site. Reynor, though, prioritizing the mineral fields here at the bottom, making sure that the drones are not going to be spread too far away. Very clean. The Lings are going to stick around, though, for a little bit longer, and they may just decide to morph into Banelings in just a moment. +1 armor here, much quicker for Reynor. Serral instead using some of his gas to go into a lair earlier. So the +1 armor is really, really nice here for Reynor, mostly because it benefits the Zerglings and also the Roaches. And considering the fact that he has not gone for a lair, I believe Reynor is going for a push. He is going for what looks like a +1 armor Ling Flood, with probably Banelings on the back of it. So you make as many Roaches as you can, and then you transition. Now this is a great scout for Reynor. He will see the timing of the lair. This is a big indication from Serral that he wants to play a normal macro game. Serral is now checking the drone count over at the 3rd, and he will see some workers. I don't know how much he saw there, truly, but it's mostly, and I love this here from Reynor, Reynor transferred excess drones from the natural, so he's purposely only at 11 here, to make it look like his economy over at the 3rd base is better than it actually is. Brenda goes back into wall off. This is super hard for Serral to read. Serral's looking at this. He's like, yo, you have a good number of workers at the 3rd base. That means you're playing a macro game too, just like me. I'll plant down a 4th hatchery. I'll go into my upgrades. I'll go into even Overlord speed. Overlord speed is nice in a macro game, but very pointless when you're dealing with a Roach all-in Reynor's going across the map right now. Serral does not have much vision of this section of the map. As a matter of fact, all of those overlords have been pushed around. Overseer here is now realizing that the worker count in that mineral line is way low, so Serral recognizes that this is what he's going to need. He cancels the overlord speed upgrade, pops up a ton of spine crawlers immediately, and he is just trying to not die. Full survival mode right now for Serral. He's got 62 versus 47 drones. He's way ahead, but he needs to stay alive. And that is going to be extremely difficult because this army here for the player in blue is absolutely massive. Good control so far, though, by the player in red. Spine crawlers are starting to finish up. Banelings are looking for drones in the mineral line. Oh, the crisis management here from Serral has been looking really solid. Negates a lot of the splash damage there, too. Backs up to the safety of the spines. Drones are pulled away from their mineral line, too, to try and soak up a bit of damage. Reynor's thinking about maybe just bypassing this. Problem is, this is fully walled in, so reinforcements are going to have a tough time getting in. Is there enough for Reynor? One of the spines is going to get sniped. Reinforcing roaches are showing up. Serral now has speed, and he also has +1 missile. Ah, Serral. That was very well done. Yeah. The longer that this goes on, the better it's going to be for the player in red. Reynor realizes that he cannot play with an economy that is this much smaller with this little tech, and he is forced to tap out. We've had many pro gamers over the years, and the discussion has always been who is the greatest of all time. Serral, in my mind, really the perfect package. He doesn't have any weaknesses. The reaction speed in that previous game was so fast, right? Like, he flew the Overseer in, and he immediately connected the dots. He had the Spine Crawlers finishing up within seconds, by the way. Like, if the Spine Crawlers were 4 seconds later, if that Overseer Scout was delayed in any way, shape, or form, Serral would have lost to that push. Instead, he made all the right choices, again and again and again. And that's sort of a theme in Serral's gameplay. Not like he's miles ahead in macro, it's not like he's miles ahead in strategic decision making or base defense or anything like that. It's just a few percentage points here and there. And it just creates this aura around you that nobody is really wanting to play you in a straight up match. And yeah, it's showing. Now, Reynor did do that strategy specifically on Abyssal Reef, and I don't really know if I like that as much. The problem with Abyssal Reef is that it's huge, which maybe in his mind makes it better. It's one of those situations where, because the map is so big, the odds of your opponent expecting you to go for a roach all-in are going to be quite low. So, Reynor probably thinking, yo, this is this is the perfect opportunity, right? Like, there's no way Serral's going to assume I'm playing this, so I'll hide some drones from my natural over at the third. I'll play it off as if I'm playing a macro game, and it almost worked. But it just barely didn't. Okay. Let's see. Serral has all the opportunities now, by the way, to do whatever he likes. He's not really one to suddenly start cheesing or to bring out loads of aggression. But, I mean, he's got 3 match points now, right? So he can do whatever he pleases for the rest of this series. And I think if you do like 3 Ling all-ins in a row, the odds of one of them working are going to be quite big. That's at least what I would be thinking if I was in Serral's shoes. Serral, though, has decided that we're not going to do any of that, or at the very least it doesn't look like it. He did leave all the drones in the Kijkwijzer, so that is something worth noting. Reynor here has decided to pull 2 drones out after getting the metabolic boost started. Serral left them in, so that is an indicator that he wants to be at least a little aggressive here in a moment, and we'll have to keep an eye out on exactly what the plan is. He's already up to 100 gas now. Baneling Nest starts up. Okay. So he's starting the Baneling Nest up as if he put the drones out of gas as soon as he had enough for metabolic boost. So Reynor could have gone for the similarly timed Baneling Nest. It's just that Serral... Ah, okay. He is hiding another build on the back of this. So this is a similar strat as what we had in the previous game, just from the other player. Serral is now pretending like he's playing a macro game with a normally timed Baneling Nest, but instead he's hiding a Roach Warren in the main base, and he's already been mining a lot of gas. He's gone for a 3rd hatchery. The 3rd hatch is mostly just for larva generation. This is not a complete all-in, but it is something that needs to deal some sort of damage if he decides to double down. Link speed now done though for Reynor. He's already sending in tons of lings of his own. I actually don't know if I like this amount of Zerglings here. Apparently he wants to just try and see if he can get it. Couple of lings sneak in. Third hatchery in a world of trouble. Reynor could have scouted the Roach Warren there. Did not quite see it. Reynor, though, is gonna force out a lot of ling production for now, as Serral desperately wants to keep this third alive. Good zoning here with the banelings. Couple of the lings at the bottom, though, trying their very best. Reinforcing Zerglings run in. Reynor will be able to finish up the hatch. Okay. Now Serral is gonna retaliate, though, with a Roach Bush. And Reynor never scouted it. Reynor never saw that Roach Warren. So this may actually come as a bit of a surprise. Keep in mind that Serral doesn't need that hatchery to go for a Roach attack. He will probably rebuild it, because I don't believe he's really going to have enough to win the game with this. But if he can, for example, snipe his opponent's third base, we will be back at 0. So we'll have to see what the line of attack is going to be. Love this little ling run by, though, from Reynor. At the very least, he now sees a bunch of roaches. He wants to see if he can also snipe a drone here, maybe a creep tumor. I think he sniped the drone. He's busy looking at other things. Lings are already running on over towards the third base, and it looks like Serral is gonna be able to at least deal a good chunk of damage to that third. Looks like we may have had a couple of Banes or something along those lines running in. But Reynor giving up on his own third base now, because he doesn't yet have a Roach Warren. Third hatchery never started up for Serral. He decides to evacuate that drone. He's now also sending all of his workers from the natural into the main base. He decides to finish up the third, but there's a lot of lings already in his natural expansion. Banelings running around, another Baneling behind Brenda and Karen, holding hands on the ramp. Gotta be so careful here, man. Banelings also available, though, for the player in blue. That was a good detonation for Serral, who's now trying to do a bit of a split to prevent maximum splash damage. Roaches are sort of caught out in the open. They're trying to wedge themselves in between the mineral fields. But good surround here by Reynor. He's going to be able to clean all of that up. Okay. So, as the dust settles, we're going to go into a third hatch. Will we see a third hatchery on the other side of the map too? Looks like it. Yeah, this is proper high-level gaming. I just want to emphasize that this matchup is extremely hard. Like, every unit dies so easily. Like, the margin for error is smaller in this matchup than I believe it is in any other. There are obviously some individual scenarios where, like, say, like, Disruptor Wars is extremely hard in Protoss versus Protoss as well. There's lots of moments where the game is difficult, but ZVZ is just so fast-moving. That was an excellent detonation there for our player in blue. He's hunting down that mineral line. He gets a cancel on the opponent's third base a second time over. Lings, though, kind of awkwardly stuck over here. They decide to target fire down a drone. Reinforcing Banes available for Serral. Reynor has to go back home. Yeah, and this is the first game where Serral seems to be struggling. Reynor not going down without a fight. I'm liking his position quite a bit right now. No lair yet, though. No lair for either player. Problem is, a lair, it's 150 minerals, 100 gas. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a handful of roaches, right? It's a couple Banes here and there. So, 11 drones is actually quite greedy here. Serral realizes that he's behind worker-wise, so he needs to catch up. But making that many drones all in one go is very risky. This is Serral actually taking some chances. A little bit more rock, paper, scissors in this matchup than in the other Zerg versus Terran and Zerg versus Protoss matchups. It's a very calculated rock, paper, scissors. Lings are gonna get cleaned up by the unit they swore to destroy. Bunch of roaches, though, also trying to see if they can force this to pay the price. And indeed, the Lings have now disappeared in the main base. Okay. Serral fires up a lair. Reynor has not really got any Evo chamber upgrades. He does not even have an evolution chamber. No lair. He is making non-stop roaches. Reynor has decided that he is ready to put all of his eggs in one basket once more with an all-out assault. It didn't go so well in the previous match. Serral is now ahead economically by only a handful of drones. Reynor did have the better exchange, though, during all of those fights. Just a few percentage points here and there. But those engagements were better for him than they were for Serral. Serral now scouts, and he sees the lack of workers over at the third base. He now knows that he is playing against another shove. Let's see. No spine crawlers this time around. He doesn't have a fourth base to cancel. Instead, it's just going to be mass roach production, so he can also counterattack. Lovely defense so far, keeping those links out of the natural expansion. Reynor needs to get a move on. There's the roaches, though. Oh my god, that's a lot of workers. Or a lot of roaches, rather, that are going to be able to hunt down whatever they can. Defender's advantage in this matchup is huge. No roach speed for either of them. Serral decides to dive deep. Try to see if he can snipe the Ravagers. Only gets one for now. Those Ravagers extremely useful. Lings run into the mineral line too. Target fire down, but mostly just here to soak up a bit of damage and deal some of it as well to those roaches in red. And it looks to me like Reynor has the superior numbers in the beginning of this engagement at the bare minimum. Great positioning here. Solid control. Corrosive Biles, so lethal. Just forcing those units in red to move around and to dodge the Biles is massive. It's Reynor who gets a point on the board. I think historically a lot of people have been turned off by the mirror matchups. Because if you look at like your quote-unquote average pro gamer Zerg versus Zerg, it doesn't really look like this. I mean, that's not me trash-talking other Zerg players. It's just that there historically have been a lot of more boring matches. But when the very best are playing against each other, and this goes not just for Zerg versus Zerg, it's the same for like Terran versus Terran, Protoss versus Protoss. When the players are this aggressive and trying to be in each other's face, it is really fun to watch. It's the same with, well, for example, Hero versus Max Specs. Those games are always fun. If we have like a Clem versus a Maru, for example, I mean, if we have the #1 Terran versus the #2 Terran, absolute bangers too. Now, ultimately, the skill, it is much more noticeable at the top, even at the pro level. I feel like that is also quite demoralizing if you are a professional gamer. I think everybody has always had that experience when you are learning a new video game. I think it's most noticeable in RTS, but when you're seeing a player that's like 200 MMR above you, right? Like 200 rating above you, and you're like, okay, let's see how good they are. Because the ladder just gave you an opponent like that. And they destroy you. They just murder you, and you're like, oh god, that is... that wasn't even close. That still seems to be the case at the professional level too. It's quite common for pro gamers to be sitting at like, I don't know, 6.6, 6.5K. Like, there are like different levels of MMR. And then you have players like, for example, Serral, like, for example, Reynor, that could easily hit 7,000. I don't know what the all-time peak is anymore, but Serral was sitting at like 7.4-ish, if I'm not mistaken, if I recall correctly. At that point, you gain like 2 MMR points for every win, and you lose like 40 for every loss. You need to have such a ridiculous win-loss ratio just to keep that ball rolling. It's hard. Anyhow, long story short, mirror matchups, also good. You should go watch them. I have a lot of Protoss versus Protoss I could cast. Every tournament is Protoss versus Protoss, man. I could cast Protoss versus Protoss for months, every day. Well, I'm not going to, but I could. Not a lot of ZVZ. No, not a lot of ZVZ. Okay, so Amygdala. Both players opening up very conventionally. As a matter of fact, if you look at the production tab so far, this is basically a mirrored game. Bailing Nest coming up, identical timings. Gas count at the bottom of the screen, practically identical. Small deviations here and there, but across the board, this is the most standard game that we have seen so far. Who is going to be the first player, or the first player to deviate from the plan? I will say that I don't like this Bailing Nest positioning. It doesn't matter because you can still complete the wall off over here. But I feel like you should always start building the wall from the side. You know what I mean? Just smacking it in the middle? Like some crazy person? Who starts their wall in the middle? Oh well. I guess I'll forgive it. It doesn't matter. Lings on running up top. Trying to see if they could potentially get a cancel on that third. A lot of HP though at this point when the hatchery is nearly done. Should be an easy cleanup. Serral trying to see if he can get 1 or 2 links for 1 Baneling. Reynor recognizes that as a bad trait. Decides to run back in. Hey! That's a mental victory more so than anything. Losing 1 Baneling is not the end of the world, but it's one of those things where you're not supposed to. And I have thought many times that you know, like, whenever I lose one of my Banelings like that, it is not a moment that you enjoy in this matchup. Eva Chamber coming up, Roach Warren right now too. We already had a Roach Warren for Reynor though. Hiding it behind the natural mineral line. He's trying to power out a bunch of those roaches. Yeah, he's actually gonna go for a whole load of them, loses another Baneling. Especially in engagements, though, that are coming up very soon, where Reynor is going to try and test the waters on the other side of the map. I think it's quite bad when you lose 2 Banelings like that. It doesn't sound significant, but at this level, you need everything you can get. Serral once more playing pretty macro-focused, going Lair, going +1 missile. Looks like Reynor, by the way, has decided to give up on the aggression. He does have 8 roaches, but... yeah, sending them towards the bottom of the map. Amygdala really only has 2 attack lanes. So later on, when those rocks bleed out, you may have some more locations where you can go across if you shut down the rocks. But at this point, there's only really 2 attack lanes. So Serral has an Overlord over here. He's got an Overlord up north. So he will see any of those move-outs. And he had a Ling just now in the main base, scouting the lair. So he knows that this is nothing all too crazy. Reynor decides to just play drones instead. He wanted to do something weird. Maybe he hoped that he was gonna get scouted, that he was doing something weird, so Serral would overreact. So far, though, not the case. Pneumatized Carapace coming up. That's the Overlord speed. That's the upgrade Serral was forced to cancel in the Abyssal Reef game. Ah, okay. Reynor once more goes into a Spire. Serral doesn't have a Spire. Is he gonna go Hydra then? Is he gonna go Spire of his own? Doesn't seem to be the case. Okay. Now, there's a couple of very dangerous moments when you're playing Mutas. Reynor's positioning of the Spire, by the way, is kind of curious, but it is one of those spots that is unlikely to get scouted, even though it's sort of out in the open. Overlord speed is done, though, and Serral's going to check over here, and he will see the Spire now. Hydra then gets planted immediately. Second Evolution Chamber also goes down. Seeing the Spire is absolutely massive. If suddenly Mutas appear, life's hard. Not such a problem when you have a bit of a heads up and you can make Hydras. Hydras, obviously, not a bad choice against those Mutas. Plus, they synergize really nicely with the roaches on the ground. Do you still commit to the Mutas at this point? I think you probably make like 6 to maybe 8 Mutas here, and then go back to roaches. If you make the Spire useful at all. Serral's just checking. He wanted to see if it finished up. Wanted to see if it cancelled. It was not cancelled, but Reynor is making an awful lot of roaches, and he sort of needs them too, because Serral is thinking about pushing. I don't think he has enough over here, but Reynor needs to respect this enough. Yeah, this is a complete fake out. Serral pretending to go for an attack, knowing that Reynor would have much rather spent more of his gas on Mutas. Now he can only make 7, and Serral has bought enough time to get Hydras of his own. Now he goes Spore Crawlers. Dude, Serral's a freaking bully, man. Like, even in a situation that shouldn't really be within his control, he's still making all the right decisions. Four Spores coming up. Hydras are gonna get their ranged upgrade done already. I'm sure that the speed research will not be long behind it. We did have a Dropper Lord, by the way. Did that one ever do anything? Oh, no. Otto, the Dropper Lord, is just chilling. That's okay. Serral needed to prioritize some more of his units. I think maybe he wanted to send some roaches or a Baneling nest or a couple Banelings across the map, but don't think he wanted to send a Baneling nest. That would be insane. Also very impressive. Drop a drone, make a Baneling nest in your opponent's creep. Sick strategy. Yeah, Mutas are now mostly here to clean up Zerglings, which is the absolute last thing you need them to be doing. Now Serral has the better, well-rounded unit composition. Roach Hydra just flows really nicely together. And Reynor has spent a bunch of resources on things that don't really do much. So I think this is about like a 500 minerals, 500 gas or so advantage. But obviously, Reynor still has a good economy, and he still has more than enough. to continue playing the match. Hydra's here to clean up any of the jobs that those corrosive balls started. Tunneling Claws coming up here for Serral. That's the Roach Burrow upgrade, so he can send them across the map if he wants to. Muta swooping in from the side. They will be able to kill the Spore Crawler, so that's something. Crisis management, though, so far here by the finisher is looking excellent. Okay. Serral's almost ready to go for an attack. He's mostly waiting for a bunch of those upgrades to finish up. He's been dancing back and forth for a while, but I don't think it's going to be for much longer. We have a mass Baneling transition here from Reynor. He's hiding those Banelings for the time being. Serral sees them now, and that means he needs to split. He cannot really be taking too much damage against those Banes, although he decides to run away for now, and it's actually working out just fine. Generally speaking, you want to mitigate as much of that splash damage as possible. He sets up a concave at the bottom of the ramp. Reynor awkwardly trying to shove through all of this. Hydra's still pretty much all alive, at least enough to snipe the Mutas out of the air. Serral decides to reveal the Burrow ability, and there's no Overseer nearby. Tunneling Claws also very rapidly heals your units when they are burrowed underground. More Roaches coming in, more Hydras coming in. Serral just seems to have enough stuff here. I don't think these Roaches in blue are going to achieve much. Reynor is going to have to go back home. He's got a lot of gas in the bank, but not... Or, sorry, a lot of minerals in the bank, but not enough gas. Okay. Tunneling Claws used defensively is not something we commonly see. It's pretty much always an all-in. Reynor actually trying to shove his army here one more time. I don't really like that too much. He's not going to win this in a straight-up engagement at all. Defender's advantage and everything. The problem is obviously this gold base. One of the Roaches is now gone around the site, and Reynor has decided that he does not want to play this out any longer. Serral looks very dominant throughout this best of 5 series as he obtains the victory 3-1.